forgotten but most influential founding father. He played a role in the Constitution we know today. He supported a fair and strong federal government. He played the main role in stabilizing the nation's economy. He is Alexander Hamilton. Although at some point history disregarded the founding father Alexander Hamilton, he broke many barriers in history and fought and contributed a significant amount to, as we know today, the United States of America. Alexander Hamilton was born January 11th in either 1755 or 1757 on the British West Indies. His mother was Rachel Fawcett Lavigne and James Hamilton, a Scottish trader. Before James Hamilton, Rachel was married to an abusive man who at one point had her imprisoned for adultery. Because of this, she basically ran away to St. Kitts and met James Hamilton and became impregnated with Alexander Hamilton's older brother. James Hamilton abandoned the family when Alexander Hamilton was young. Alexander Hamilton got his first job at 11. Around the time of Hamilton getting his first job, his mother, Rachel Fawcett Lavigne, died at 38. Nicholas Kruger, who was Hamilton's boss at the time, valued him as an employee. When Hamilton wrote his hurricane letter in 1772, Nicholas Kruger was the one who published it in order to send Hamilton to America to get an education. Hamilton's hurricane letter was really the start of his whole life. In this letter, he wrote about the hurricane that came to his hometown. He has a disturbed, traumatized, and melancholy tone throughout the letter as he describes the screams he could hear outside and his confusion on why this happened because of his obedience to He who gave the winds to blow and lightnings to rage. Not to mention, he wrote this letter to his father, James Hamilton. As I said before, the hurricane letter was the real start of Hamilton's life. At around 16 years old, Hamilton arrived in New York in 1773 to attend King's College. As the revolution was getting started, Hamilton was more interested in politics than his education. This is only the 5th of 35 pages from Hamilton's A Full Vindication of the Measures of the Congress, which was written in 1774, defending patriots against the pro-loyalists. Hamilton was a quick learner. Before graduating, he left King's College to join the Patriots in protesting British-imposed taxes and trade regulations. In 1775, Hamilton joined the New York Provincial Artillery Company, a group created to protect New York City against the British. In 1777, Hamilton was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel of the Continental Army. It is not clear when Alexander Hamilton met George Washington. If you watch the Hamilton musical, you know that Alexander Hamilton was George Washington's right-hand man. That isn't exactly the correct term for it. Back then it was called AD Camp, which translates to Camp Helper. Moving into the more personal aspects of Alexander Hamilton's life, he met his wife Eliza briefly in Albany. Eliza's aunt threw a party for Washington's staff in the winter of 1780. Of course, Hamilton was invited. Alexander and Eliza met again. Eliza was wealthy with old money and had a reputation, while Alexander was a bastard, orphan, and a son of a whore, as they would say back then. These differences did not stop them. December 14th, 1780, Alexander and Eliza got married. They would also soon have 9 children. Moving back into Hamilton's life during the American Revolution.
The Battle of Yorktown, 1781.
As Washington's aide-de-camp, Hamilton was mostly writing letters asking for supplies and etc. But for the Battle of Yorktown, Hamilton was a part of the action. He led a successful charge in which the plan was to cut off the British in Yorktown and end the war as depicted in the image shown. This plan worked because this was the last named conflict of the Revolutionary War. British at home had turned against the war, which resulted in the creation of a pro-American parliament in which peace negotiations began. In the 1783 Treaty of Paris, the British agreed to respect American independence as far as the Mississippi River. America was now independent and Alexander Hamilton now had a reputation. I mentioned earlier, before graduating, Hamilton joined the Patriots. After the war, he went back to New York to finish college and practice law. In 1789, when George Washington was elected president, he asked Alexander Hamilton to be part of his cabinet as the first Secretary of the Treasury. And
you simply must meet Thomas.
Thomas Jefferson's coming home.
Thomas Jefferson's coming home.
Washington also invited Thomas Jefferson to be a part of his cabinet as the first Secretary of State. Washington knew there would be some disagreements between the people in his cabinet, but he never thought that Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson would become enemies. In 1792, when Hamilton's economic policy that proposed to borrow money at a lower interest rate to get rid of the national debt began, Jefferson and Hamilton began to wonder about one another. They weren't always enemies. Washington also played a role in their rivalry because he wanted each of them to be content with their offices. He told both of them that their role was the most important. This caused both of them to see one another as less than themselves. They also both often wrote letters complaining about each other to Washington. Hamilton also had a much bigger plan that Jefferson didn't agree with, a plan that made him one of the most influential founding fathers. His financial plan, which was to have the central government take on each state's war debt to promote unity and a more legit perception of the government, to create a U.S. bank to have a more stable paper currency, and create a mercantilist system where the central government supports local manufacturers and stops relying on expensive foreign goods. Jefferson believed this plan was unconstitutional and wouldn't benefit everybody. Nonetheless, the bill was signed by Washington, creating the bank in 1791, and it still stands today. Hamilton and Jefferson had many other conflicts and disagreements. Another big one was Jefferson's sympathy for the French Revolution, something Hamilton didn't exactly have sympathy for. Jefferson began to believe that Hamilton had more power than him because of the relationship he had with Washington. Jefferson resigned from Washington's cabinet as Secretary of State in 1793. Washington stepped down from president in order to live a private, normal life in Mount Vernon, like he always wanted. Fun fact, George Washington didn't want to be president. 1796, Jefferson ended up as vice president to John Adams despite his reluctance on the matter of being a presidential candidate at all. And then
The Reynolds pamphlet. Alexander Hamilton had a torrid affair, and he wrote it down right there.
Hamilton had an affair with Maria Reynolds in 1791, all while her husband James Reynolds consented to the affair as long as Hamilton paid him. By the end of 1792, Hamilton ended the affair. The affair was kept secret until James Reynolds convinced Hamilton's political enemies he had dirt on Hamilton while he was in prison. 3 Republicans, James Monroe among them, confronted Hamilton because it looked like he had been illegally investing, spending, whatever. It just didn't seem that Hamilton was being honest with the nation's money. Hamilton made clear that he was being blackmailed for his affair, and the 3 men agreed to keep it a secret. However, rumors spread and grew. Hamilton was accused of financial corruption and sex scandal. In the Reynolds pamphlet, Hamilton went public and, to summarize, made clear that he was guilty of an affair, but not of financial corruption, just in a 37-page pamphlet. This obviously caused some problems in Hamilton's personal life. Even though he was trying to save his political life, it can be inferred that he hurt his wife Eliza. If Eliza was angry with Alexander, she definitely forgave him at some point because she pushed to make sure the world remembered him after he died. In the election of 1800, Aaron Burr, Alexander's friend who became his political enemy, and Thomas Jefferson were tied to be elected president. Hamilton disliked both candidates, but urged the election of Jefferson as president. He was killed by Aaron Burr on July 12, 1804, in a duel in Weehawken, New Jersey. Some may assume it was because he urged Jefferson to be president over him. That may be a part of it. However, the main reason was because of remarks Hamilton allegedly made belittling Burr. And so Hamilton died. His enemies destroyed his reputation and America forgot him, but his legacy still lived on, making him the most influential founding father. Despite Hamilton being a bastard, orphan, and a son of a whore who immigrated to America without $1 to his name or a reputation, he worked his way up and always fought against what he disagreed with and stood up for what he believed in. Alexander Hamilton is a prime example of a person who broke barriers in history.